Hey, how's it going? Today we're going to play Nicolai's 16th place Snorlax list from the Stuttgart Regional. I was scrolling through the list from the last couple regionals last night and saw that the Snorlax list had the Enriching Energy in it, so I had to try it out. Enriching Energy, of course, is a spec, and it says it's a colorless energy, and when we attach it to one of our Pokemon, we can draw 4 cards. It's like a fine card, but there's so many better ace specs, it's barely ever going to see play, so this is probably the one time that it's actually good in a deck, and it is pretty good in this deck. The whole idea of this deck is we have the Snorlax with the block ability that says when it's in the active spot, our opponent's active can't retreat. We're trying to stick something in the active and deck our opponent out with cards like Eri and Misfortune Sisters to remove items from their hand and from their deck so that they don't have like switches and stuff. We have the Cornerstone Ogerpon that can't be damaged by Pokemon with abilities. This is for like Charizard and Goldengo. We have Mimikyu that can't be damaged by EX or Vs for decks like Raging Bolt and Iron Thorns. We have Pidgeot so that we can't deck out, and also we can reuse the Enriching Energy because the Pidgeot says if it's on the bench, we can shuffle it and all attach cards back in the deck. So we can attach the Enriching Energy to it, shuffle it back in the deck, and reuse it. We can also combo the energy with Penny and Penny up the Pokemon it's attached to, put it back down, and reuse it to draw cards. It's pretty cool. Lets us draw cards under like Iron Thorns and stuff like that because Iron Thorns shuts off our Rotom, which is our main form of draw support. I wanted to just kind of throw this game in here because I think it's kind of funny. It's real short, and I figured I could just talk about Snorlax right now. I'm not the biggest fan of the deck, but it's not in the best position right now. It beats a lot of the decks, but any of the Petra and EX decks, it has a really hard time against. Dragapult, Iron Thorns, it can also struggle against, stuff like that. So luckily it's not too overpowered because they have printed a lot of really broken cards for it lately, like the Accompanying Flute, Eri, and Misfortune Sisters, and Erica's Invitation, and Xerosic Machination all being in format at once. With Snorlax is just kind of ridiculous. The deck, there's not like too much counterplay you can do against it. Obviously there is some, but you can also just lose the game to like a lucky Accompanying Flute. But yeah, here I top deck the energy, attach it, bench 2 Snorlax, and after my opponent's like 2-minute long turn, they just concede. I don't know, I thought that was pretty funny. And this is a game that I played against Dusknoir Dragapult, which tends to be kind of a hard matchup for Snorlax. Like any deck with Dusknoir that can manipulate the prizes, force you to, they can Iona you to like a lower hand. They can also take like big multi-prize turns. They can always one-shot our Snorlax while also pressuring the bench. These matchups can be pretty tricky for Snorlax. Kind of our main goal is to try and make them like burn their Turo if they have one, or if they play a switch card, which I think they often play one. We try to like hit that off Eri or Misfortune Sisters. Another thing we can do is try and hit rare candies off of Misfortune Sisters. And yet another like obviously good thing here is they started the Pheasantipity. If they started a Dreepy and we're just able to put down like a couple Dreepies and a couple Dusclops, this game would be a lot harder, almost unwinnable, because even if I like stuff Mimikyu in their face, they can just Dusknoir it and then they can knock out a Bravery Charmed Snorlax. So I put the Handheld Fan on the Snorlax. If they hit into it, if they damage it and it's in the active, it lets us move one of their energies to one of their bench Pokemon. So that's kind of like my thought. If I can just slowly get rid of all their energies, maybe move them to the Dusclops, which is, I don't know, that's kind of tricky because we want to ideally move them to a Pokemon that can't ever get out of play or can never attack. And with the Dusknoirs, they can knock them out, put them in energies in the discard pile, and get the energies back with Stretcher and Super Rod. But if we put them on Pheasantipity, they could also attack with that. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm just going to put them on the Dusknoir, is my thought. At least like hopefully we can run them out of recovery. We do hit their switch with that Eri that we played a minute ago, which is very nice. That is definitely going to be the main card we're looking for, and is going to make them have a lot harder time, because I'm sure that their plan was to build up a Dragapult on the bench, switch into it, pop a couple Dusknoirs, Iona us to like a 4-card hand, and just start taking knockouts. And honestly, we would probably lose if that happened. So yeah. Also, we noticed that our Eri is prized, our second Eri, which is kind of unfortunate, but definitely something that you want to take note of. I tend to forget that, like my prizes, when I'm playing online for some reason. I'm like always like watching a YouTube video or something while I'm playing, which is probably not the best. And it definitely kind of sidetracks me because I forget that it's in there later. And our second Mist Energy is in there. I do remember that because Mist Energy is important in this matchup. We would want to like put it on a Mimikyu on the bench after they don't have any Dusknoirs left. But yeah, they do build up their Pheasantipity, which is an interesting strategy and actually causes me to make a mistake here. There I was reading the Handheld Fan to see if it works on the bench, and it doesn't, so it wasn't like a terrible move by not attaching it to the bench. I originally didn't put it on the bench guy because I thought they'd want to knock out the active guy with the energy, but I guess they don't want to damage it and give me extra value with my pennies, like removing damage and putting the energy back in my hand, and I get to move that energy, so that makes sense. I played that Misfortune Sisters. I left the Counter Catcher in the deck because I thought it was a bad card for them to draw, and I thought they were going to start taking prizes here, which is a mistake. I should have that's kind of a downside of almost not respecting your opponent, which I don't want to say like I disrespected them or anything. I just didn't expect them to not take prizes. I was sure that they were just going to knock this Snorlax out and Counter Catcher would be a dead card, but they obviously have other plans once they start hitting into the Rotom. They have like a really good kind of half thought out plan where they're just trying to spread a ton of damage in play and then make it so they can take a ton of prizes in one turn with their Dusknoirs and stuff, and probably also combine it with like a Counter Catcher and an Iono. The Counter Catcher obviously so they can retreat. But yeah, I don't know if they played the matchup a ton and figured that out, or if they just kind of had the plan in their head, because that's what I do a lot. Like I have an idea in my head of how I want to play against decks like Snorlax, but when you actually start playing against it, things go wrong that you didn't really plan for, and it ends up not being as straightforward as you would have thought. Now my opponent evolves into a Dusclops and just hits into my other Snorlax. This is when it's like pretty clear that they're not going to be taking prizes, which kind of sucks. Snorlax really wants Counter Catcher to be live, and I used the Fortune Sisters there and hit double candy. That is all 4 rare candies gone. That was one of my main goals. It stops them from it makes it so I can Counter Catcher Dreepies a little easier and stick them in the active and not have a threat of like candy Dragapult and then they just start swinging. Yeah. So they knock out their Dusclops there, just put 50 on my Mimikyu, and then use their Dracloak ability. Kind of interesting sequencing there, but I guess they just wanted to force me to take a prize. And yeah, just so they are not going ahead in prizes. I know I have 200 damage on my Rotom. I have to pick that up. I can't let them take too many prizes at once, because if they could get into a Dragapult next turn, they could potentially take 4 or 5 prizes. Because if they could knock out the Rotom and set up a couple Snorlaxes to be knocked out, yeah, there'd be like 4 prizes almost. It does end up being kind of weird though, because if they start putting this Dusclops or Dusknoir damage somewhere that's not a Mimikyu, they're going to be forced to save enough energy to attack the Mimikyu with the Dracloak, or else I'll just be able to get to a like double Mimikyu board with the Mist Energy Mimikyu on the bench, and they'll never be able to, take all their prizes, which would be pretty good for me. Of course, they could like boss or Counter Catcher, and I don't know, if you just end up with lone Mimikyu in the active, it becomes very hard for them if they're down too many energies. And I think that they typically play 3 Psychic and 3 Fire. That's definitely like a good thing to know in these matchups, is their exact energy count, and I'm pretty sure it's 3 and 3. And they are down 2 of each, so they do have 2 energy left, which is, I don't know, it's not too much. It makes it so if they retreat again, it's going to be really hard for them to attack into Mimikyus with Dracloak, so that is good. There, I penny up my Rotom. I don't want to give them just free reign to retreat into a Dragapult and start attacking. That's just going to make it hard for me. I'm kind of confused what that animation, like the green popping thing that keeps coming up is. I think it was happening when I was like selecting my second Pal Pad target, or when I was choosing to get back in Eri. It seemed to keep happening, which was a little weird. And my opponent just attacks into the Mimikyu. They really don't want to go ahead on prizes, and I can kind of respect that. Yeah, it's whenever I grab Eri that weird animation happens. And there I get to look at their hand. I see they have a boss, So like next time I bring up their Dreepy, they are just going to be able to boss and retreat it, but regardless of that, I still want to do it and force them to get rid of as many energy as possible. Now they do knock out my Snorlax, so we're even on prizes. I would really like them to go ahead on prizes. It just like activating Counter Catcher for this deck is really nice from the Snorlax side. From the other side, if you can avoid it, you want to, but most of the time just being really aggressive against Snorlax is going to be the best bet, like hand disruption and aggressiveness. I also don't play down the Enriching Energy because I know they have an Iono. They can pop this Dusknoir and Iono me to 4. So I would really like to keep that energy in my deck as a way to draw. Yeah, I don't understand that animation. It really makes no sense to me. It's kind of annoying, but yeah. So we have the Dreepy in the active. I'm just gonna pass. Like I said, I could play the energy down. I don't know. Now that I'm like watching it back, I could have played it to the bench Snorlax so that Penny was a target to draw off of an Iono. So maybe that was kind of a mistake. And it looks like my opponent, yeah, they have another boss, or that might be the first boss they played, I can't really remember. But they also barely have any cards left in their deck, and they pop their Dusknoir here, which is going to be their downfall. I take a prize, it's my last Accompanying Flute, and it's kind of funny when I play it next turn. They got really unlucky here, and the end of their deck is double Rotom Arven, so I just put both Rotom on the bench. They have one card left, I boss the Rotom, and they essentially lose. Now, that is really why I don't like Snorlax as a deck. That was basically like completely random. They drew their cards in the wrong order and lost the game because of it. I think they were probably going to lose either way because they were just playing it a little too slow, but there might have been something there if they had like another Super Rod left and could get a Dusknoir line back and just attack once or twice with Dragapult. Maybe they could have taken all 6 prizes or the remaining 4 or 5. I'm not sure, but yeah, that was Snorlax with the Enriching Energy. It's definitely pretty good in the deck. Drawing 4 cards is just kind of an insane effect, especially on an energy card. And yeah, try this deck out. If you want to rank up really quick, you automatically lose to like the Petron EX decks, but how the ladder is at the beginning now, until you get to Master Ball, you don't lose ELO or lose rank points. So just conceding those games and playing out the other ones where your opponent will concede a lot of the time is just a really quick way to rank up. It is really cheesy, but I don't know. It's kind of one of those things where I think the ranked ladder should start being ELO based much sooner. So the goal is to just get to Arceus so that you can finally get into the like ELO rankings. I don't think it is the worst strategy in the world. The deck is pretty easy to play too. You can just kind of like sit on your phone and watch YouTube or whatever and just click instant charge over and over again and wait for your opponent's deck out. So like or dislike, comment, and subscribe. Take care and have a good one.